Hey, yo, everyone, Andrew here, bringing you another video review, and today we're going to be doing Superman, Earth 1, Volume 2. Now, for those of you that know nothing about the Earth 1 series of graphic novels from DC, allow me to inform you a little bit. Basically, these Earth 1 graphic novel stories are, well, graphic novels released by DC telling stories of major superheroes that they own, such as Superman and Batman, on an alternate reality away from the mainstream DC continuity. It's a way for them to tell stories that they never would normally be able to tell because of the constraints of continuity and the histories that go behind the characters. So, for example, everything you read of Superman and Earth 1 has nothing to do with the mainstream Superman in the DC universe. They're separate characters from separate universes, but it's still recognizably Superman, despite whatever changes may be done. So far, they have Superman Earth 1 Volume 1 and 2 and Batman Earth 1 Volume 1. Now, whether or not they're going to branch off into other superheroes, we're just going to have to wait and see. I believe I remember Grant Morrison saying something about wanting to do a Wonder Woman project involving Earth 1, but how much validity is to that, who knows. But anyways, putting that all aside, Superman Earth 1 Volume 2 is of course the second volume in the Superman Earth 1 series, and it picks up exactly where Superman Volume 1 for Earth 1 left off. For the sake of this review, I'm not going to be throwing Earth 1 into every single thing regarding this trade paperback or this story. I'm just going to say Volume 2 because it's a little bit quicker and is, well, I don't have to say Earth 1 every 5 seconds. The question is this: is Volume 1 of Superman Earth 1 was an okay story and it was fun, but on a whole it was just, well, another Superman story retelling Superman's origin slightly different. Unlike Batman Earth 1, it didn't take that many steps in another direction. See, Batman Earth 1 was recognizably Batman, but very different from Batman. It was a true Elseworld story. It felt like Batman. We got that recognizable feeling of Batman. The universe was Batman, but there were major changes to it. For example, in Batman Earth 1, Bruce Wayne never left Gotham after his parents died, never became that master detective or master martial artist. He was trained by Alfred, who in this universe was kind of, a badass. Not to say Alfred isn't a badass, but more so a badass. But he never really left Gotham. That's a huge thing that changes the Batman mythos. That makes him more human and a little bit more flawed. With Superman, we only got really a different spin on how Krypton was blown up. That's about it. And Superman is, well, recognizably younger. He's only in his real early 20s. I believe in Earth 1, he's only considered 22. Maybe he's younger than me. So that's what's the big problem of Superman Earth 1 Volume 1 is that it was a good story, but it wasn't enough different to make it stand out. The question is this: will Volume 2 do enough to stand out and make itself different? Or will, unfortunately, it follow the same path as its previous installment and kind of just be Superman, a little younger, fighting something different? Well, just gonna have to wait and see. So let's jump into Superman Earth 1 Volume 2 and see exactly what the Man of Steel is up to. Now, in this story, the basic main threat is the parasite. I'm not gonna, or the parasite, or the parasuit, or whatever you want to call him. Basically, he's the main villain. It's what Superman has to go up against. And in this story, they really want to push the idea of power. That, and I will read this: power corrupts, power seduces, power controls. It is the tagline for the story. But actually, in this story, it's not really power that is the theme, rather isolation and social conflict. See, the thing is, in this story, Superman is painted off as an individual that is so isolated from everyone else that he has no friends. He has very few people that he can connect to at all. And this goes so far as when Lois Lane investigates Superman, that she finds that he does, or not just Superman, but investigates Clark Kent, finds that he does everything in his power to not stand out. He has the potentials to be an A plus 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 student, but he actually goes out of his way to be just a C student. he does everything he can to blend in without actually standing out. This brings up some interesting topics for Superman. For example, is that he's not friends with Lois and Jimmy at all. Actually, he makes one friend in the story, someone that you would never expect Superman to become friends with. And it also invokes a lot of different background stories for Superman, like the first pet he ever had, which was a cat, and how that affected him in his life. See, this isn't about power. Yes, the parasite does suck the power from Superman and does make him realize how vulnerable he is and how important power is. Yes, there is the tagline of power when he's dealing with the general in a foreign nation who believes that having guns means having the power, but really it's being courageous is having the power or something along that line, some, goody two shoes stuff. But it isn't power that makes this story stand out. It's isolation, friendships, standing out, or blending in. It is Superman's total isolation from society that makes this story stand out, because this is more of a character study of how Superman is trying to integrate himself into society, how Clark Kent is trying to find his way, rather than the definition of power and what it does to people. Yes, that theme's there, but it isn't the major tagline. Throughout the story, he does have to deal with those issues, while at the same time, something's brewing, something in the background. See, Superman is regarded as either a god, a savior, or a demon, a weapon that could go off at any time against the world, particularly the United States. So there's something brewing in the background that Superman will eventually have to deal with. Something that could take Superman out. Will Superman be able to find that connection with society, find that connection with the people on Earth, make those friends? Will Superman also be able to take on a villain that's so powerful that it can actually suck the power out of him? Or will he unfortunately have to fall at the powerful grip, the parasite? You're just going to have to read and see. On to the good, the bad, and whether or not you should get it. Good. Well, first and foremost, one of the things that I said about Earth 1 Superman Volume 1 is that I didn't like the fact that it didn't do much to stand out. It was, on a whole, a very safe Superman Elseworld story. Could have been a movie. I mean, just a reinterpretation of Superman's origin. Slightly different, but not enough to make it stand out. That's why I only gave Earth 1 Volume 1 maybe, I think, a 3.5 out of 5. It was an okay story, but it just wasn't anything great. This story, however, Volume 2, does stand out. It feels very different from the Superman we have, in that the main villains are different looking, but also different in origin and background. Superman as a character is a little bit more edgier, and he is different as a character. Not only as Clark Kent being that isolated character that doesn't know how to, get in touch with people, but also it's Superman's edgier. He makes really, well, drastic choices that I don't think the mainstream Superman would make, but at the same time, it feels Superman. Lois Lane is a borderline sociopath. She has very little connection with people. She's so ingrained in the work that she uses people as pawns. She's almost kind of a bad person, but it's believable bad. And there's obviously character growth there. Jimmy Olsen is a completely different character. He has balls. He's not a wuss. Not to say Jimmy Olsen is always a wuss. I mean, please, Silver Age Jimmy Olsen was like the freaking Robin for Superman. But the fact of the matter remains is these characters are all different. You start to really feel these characters and how different they are, especially the characters that are revealed at the end, who I don't want to reveal who they are or spoil who they are, but you get to see these characters are very different. They're not your traditional superhero characters or your Superman characters. And in that, it feels like recognizably Superman, but not Superman. It's different, which is good. And that's what I was aiming for the story. Superman in this is portrayed very well, being that isolated character that really tries to blend in without standing out. I feel as though it's something that they try heavily to do with the mainstream Superman, but they really haven't found that tempo, that balance that needed to be made. I mean, this issue, Action Comics Annual #1, kind of did it, but in general, this is something that succeeded in this story, but hasn't succeeded in the mainstream continuity, in that Superman's very isolated in here. He's very depressing, actually, and the character works with that because he's really trying to find his place in the world, really trying to find where he stands in the universe. I mean, is he Superman or is he Clark Kent? And in that, is he allowed to have friends or if he's not allowed to have friends? In addition to that, there's some great moments told in this, particularly my favorite moment of the book, which was really sad, and I actually was getting choked up reading it to my fiance, was the story about Superman's first pet. And it's not crypto. It's actually a cat. But it talks about Superman's first pet, and I don't want to spoil what it is, but it's a really sad story, and it's a beautiful one too, about companionship, about love, and about loss. It really was a fun little like 5 panel story about Superman's pet. In addition to that, we also see a supporting cast for Superman that's very much different from the supporting cast that we see in previous stories, which is good. I mean, Lois and Jimmy are more or less antagonists in a way for Superman, or more or less antagonists in a way for Clark Kent. Lois wants to find out what it is about Clark Kent that makes him different and makes him stand out, and what's the thing about him. And she goes into investigation. And yes, Lois has always been interesting on uncovering who Clark Kent is or the connection between him and Superman. But she's very aggressive about this, and she doesn't do it for good reason. She does it because she's curious and because she wants to expose him. Uh, but the thing is Superman's supporting cast. He has a friend here in this, a female girl that's actually the neighbor in his apartment building, and there's stuff about this woman that you would never expect her to be a friend of Superman, with the lifestyle choices she makes, or how she presents herself, or just in general her overall personality and demeanor, which is completely different from Clark Kent's. She's a little bit more outgoing and spunky, where he's a little bit more reserved and calm. And she's a more experienced woman when it comes down to certain physical stuff, where Clark Kent is a little bit more reserved and he's a little bit more Boy Scoutish. So you get to see that there's a lot introduced in this that makes it unique as a Superman story. The fight scenes were overall fun and enjoyable, and I did like the usage of the Kryptonian spaceship that he has. And the ending with certain characters I think were actually interesting and invokes interest in the next volume. Bad. First and foremost is in this, Superman makes a special suit to help him in the fights, and in particular the final fight. But in that final fight, the special suit lasts for maybe 2 panels, and it starts shattering. I can understand that you can't rely on that suit because then it turns into another typical Superman fight. But I mean, it doesn't even last that long. I think it would have broken down a little bit later than just 2 panels in. In addition to that, there's about 5 endings in the story. There's the ending for the foreshadowing, the ending for Clark, the ending for Lois, the ending for Superman, the ending foreshadowing again a certain villain, and it just there's tons of endings to this, which I think they all take away from each other. They work, they're fine. It's not like they're bad endings. They just, again, there's a lot of them, so they kind of take away from each other. But those are really the only bads. That, and while the fights were enjoyable, there were only like 2 of them, and that's about it. But I don't really know if I can consider that a bad because there's enough good in this that it kind of counterbalances it. On a whole, whether or not you should get it. So, does Superman Earth 1 do better for its Volume 2 than it did for its Volume 1? Absolutely. This stands out and it does what Volume 1 should have done. And the great thing about this is you don't need to read Volume 1 to enjoy this. I think it does enough to be recognizably Superman, but be a different Superman and be a different Superman story. It was enjoyable, it was fun, and I just had a blast reading it. I'm going to give this a 5 out of 5. It's definitely something I recommend people picking up. Maybe I'm giving it such a high score because it did surprise me, but it was still good surprise. It was something that really made me enjoy this book, and that's what's important about books, is the level of enjoyment that you get out of it. I think if people read this, they will enjoy it, and it was much better than the first volume. Hopefully the third volume follows those trends and continues to get better, because that's what's important, is growth and getting better and improving. So, Superman, Earth 1, Volume 2. Is it worth picking up? Yeah. That said, this is Andrew saying, peace out for now.